$5 for 2 weeks access to Caravan to Midnight. Go to caravantomidnight.com, click subscribe now, scroll down to the bottom there, you'll see $5 for 2 weeks. Take us up on it. You're going to love it, I'm telling you. This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is a mighty ark full. We're all making our way to midnight. That's where everything that was going to happen has happened, and what's going to happen is on its way at that very point. Somewhere it's about to turn midnight, so remember it. And without further ado, here is, I would like to say a friend of the Caravan. I do believe that he is, Jay Dyer. He's known for being the mastermind of the premier film and philosophy site on the net, jaysanalysis.com. And above all, Jay's graduate work focused on the interplay of film, geopolitics, and espionage. He's a public speaker, a lecturer, a comedian. Yes, he is. You got to have humor. You got to tell the truth or humor, or they'll kill you. That's Oscar Wilde. He's author of the popular title, Esoteric Hollywood, Sex, Cults, and Symbols in Film. His first book made it to Amazon's #1 spot in its first month of release in the film and Hollywood category. In addition, Esoteric Hollywood 2 was just released this year. It's available right here on this link that's going to be posted in the guest media section there at Caravan to Midnight, and specifically at arkmidnight.com. That's Ark with a K, like a boat, not like a geometric, path. Jay's known for his in-depth commentary and a satire and ongoing celebrity impressions. He's appeared on numerous nationally syndicated radio and TV shows, and most recently, Jay is co-host and co-creator with Jay Widener of the TV show Hollywood Decoded on Gaia TV. And so, without further ado, I think I already said without further ado, and I think there's been some ado, but welcome to the program, Jay. Thanks for coming on tonight.
I shouldn't be here. I should be in school. I should be across the ocean in school. How dare you? How dare you, John?
Yeah.
Relax, kitty.
I could resist a little Greta to bring in. Grab me back.
She's the poster child for the 21st century release of Children of the Corn.
It is Children of the Corn, exactly.
Bless her. She's being run. Somebody, I can't remember to save my life who was going to do it, Jay, but somebody walked up to her on the street in Stockholm and said, I'd like to talk to you about this, if you'd be all right with that, if you wanted to. And instantly, this woman, I presume it was her mother, came over and got her under the watchful eye of the all-in-black bodyguard. And they're being run by Soros, as it turns out. He's over there in the shadow somewhere.
Yeah. We've seen the usage of the child as a shield for many years. This is an old tactic, so it's an old war tactic where you can manipulate populations on a large scale through. It's actually kind of a Hollywood trick, right? To manipulate emotions through this kind of stuff. It goes all the way back to, do you remember the Jessica Lynch scenario? Even though it wasn't using a kid, it's a little known fact that was actually advised by Jerry Bruckheimer. The Pentagon asked for Jerry Bruckheimer's advice on how to sell women in the military through the Jessica Lynch story to the masses. It's actually in mainstream news.
Well, I just found out recently that somebody that I like, I enjoyed talking to him about his book and so forth, ex-CIA guy, supposed to be retired. He's actually the head of the, pretty good authority, head of the Department of Film Liaison out there in Hollywood. It's like, oh, really? So, CIA's been all over the movies for a long time, haven't they?
Right, definitely. Would that be like a Chase Brandon Miltbearden type of character?
Oh, you pulled the name right out of my brain, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I wrote a book on it, so yeah, I had to research all this. I was doing it in grad school, looking at this topic. So I don't know if this is true, but if you remember the film Wag the Dog, Wag the Dog is rumored to be related to one of those guys. I don't remember which one, but I'm not positive that's the case.
Isn't that something? Now, your recent book, the latest one here, Esoteric Hollywood 2, tell us about that. Just tell us about the bridge between 1 and 2.
Right. Well, 1 focused on film symbolism in terms of big directors. So I took the first 80 pages and I did Kubrick in part 1. Then I moved to Spielberg, and then I moved to the 70s and dystopias, and then I moved to Hitchcock and 007. So it was really focused around big-name people. And then for part 2, I moved in a different direction, and I kind of structured it around topics. So I went from things that I felt like I had not done justice to in part 1. So I talked about the mafia, cults, spies, and the occult in relationship to Hollywood, because, we all know about different cults that relate to Hollywood. People think about, Kabbalah, or they think about Scientology, or even maybe lesser known cults that have deeper connections to Hollywood that aren't known. So I dealt with that in about the first 150 pages, and then I needed to really cover the way MK Ultra is portrayed in film, because we know there's a lot of reality behind the MK Ultra mind control experiments. But what about the way it's portrayed in film? Is it always false? Is it sometimes telling us a little more than we know in film? And so I think so. So I had to cover some of the big mind control films, Clockwork Orange, American Ultra, this kind of stuff. And I even include newer films like Neon Demon, which I don't recommend. It's a very gruesome movie, but I do feel like it dealt with mind control in the fashion and modeling side of things, which is an important, connect to the Hollywood side of things as well. And then in part 3 of the book, I moved to geoengineering, which does come up in several films, treated in different ways, anything from Dune to Snowpiercer to Signs to Aliens. If you recall, in the Ridley Scott and James Cameron Alien installments, there are references to geoengineering and terraforming, which I had not dealt with extensively in part 1. And then the final section, I moved to Hollywood transhumanism. So I'll talk about The Matrix, I'll talk about Terminator series, I'll talk about AI, Metropolis, a lot of these kind of classic Hollywood movies that are way ahead of their time, and what they were telling us about the coming age.
Hey, Dune. Now, there's a title I haven't heard in a long time. I saw the book. I tried to read it when I was a kid. It's an old book. And I thought, I'm not really into it. Who was in that?
Really?
Wasn't Sting or somebody into it? Part of that in that picture, Wesley Snipes or somebody? Yeah, it was Sting.
He plays the villain. You're absolutely right. And as usual, David Lynch casts Kyle MacLachlan as the protagonist.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really, really weird stuff going on in Dune. It actually functions on multiple levels, be it the film or the movie. I think the David Lynch movie is actually pretty good. I know David Lynch hates it, but yeah, actually, it covers everything from international drug trafficking, manipulation of markets and cartels, all the way up to kind of ritual initiation and esoteric occult type stuff. All of that's packaged into Dune, as well as terraforming and geoengineering.
Wow. I like The Aviator. I thought DiCaprio did a good job. I really did. I know
Absolutely.
Somebody's running all these things he champions and shows up for. I get it. I get it. You're going to make a lot of money. Follow me. You got to do what I tell you to do. Okay, here's $1 million. So thank you. Okay, now say this. I mean, that's how it is, right? That's the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. Well, what about The Aviator?
Well, that's a great one. I mean, Howard Hughes, he's kind of like he's the big player of his day. He was making the blockbusters back in the 20s and 30s. He did big war propaganda films like Hell's Angels. And he's such a weird, eccentric character that he actually ended up kind of embroiled in a lot of bizarre CIA-type things like Project Azorian, where they were literally trying to create a big, gigantic ship that could swallow other ships.
What was that thing he rescued? He rescued a submarine with a Glomar or something or other.
That's exactly what it is. And then that actually shows up in the 1977 Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yep.
So yeah, actually, they would take a lot of these kind of Howard Hughesy type ideas and then import them into other movies. But yeah, I mean, Hughes was surrounded by mobsters. He was surrounded by, his bodyguards were religious mobsters, we'll say, in terms of a very large church in America. I don't want anybody too mad.
Well, more to the point,
Yeah, so,
I've read that he actually had gay Mormon drivers and so forth because he knew that they wouldn't mess with the actresses.
Exactly. Yeah, that's hinted at, if I recall, in the Scorsese film. I haven't seen the Scorsese movie in a long time, but I think you're right. I think that is hinted at in the film. But yeah, and then of course there's the whole speculation about what happened to Howard Hughes towards the end of his life. And if you think in terms of Bond again, in Diamonds Are Forever, there's a whole scene that was cut from the film. It's in the DVD extras, but there's actually a character who's based on Howard Hughes, and he kind of gets sequestered into his condo at the top of his, Las Vegas gambling casino resort thing. He's stuck up there, and this, of course, leads people to speculate that is relating perhaps to his famous kidnapping, because there was this strange situation with what happened to Howard Hughes, right?
Yeah.
That's all shrouded in mystery. I don't claim to know exactly what was going on there, but there is at least enough in the Scorsese installment to make a lot of really interesting connections between the intelligence agencies back in the 30s era, prior to the 1942 and 1947 with the OSS and CIA, and then Hughes is still tied to the CIA, and even Kissinger has commented on this, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I got a pretty good idea what happened to Mr. Hughes. I always thought Mr. Hughes was just a very, very cool guy. He's entitled to be as strange as he wants to, like Ricky Nelson was singing about in that song, Garden Party. There's Mr. Hughes in his disguise. It's pretty cool. He lived out his life in Panama.
You think so?
Yeah, I really do. There was an author that we came on the program, came on the Caravan at Midnight many years ago now. We've been over, well, I say many. We've been at it over 5.5 years, so it's getting to feel like many years ago. We had a book called Boxes. All of Hughes' stuff was in boxes. And he was just a very, very interesting cat, but he didn't turn into a derelict in some aluminum foil covered windowed apartment in Las Vegas watching all night movies. That's not what happened, Art,
keeping his pee in jars.
Oh, good grief! I mean, come on, that's as phony as that whole thing that happened in Vegas the other year. There, I tell you what, are movies revealing reality, or are they creating reality, or are they getting us used to the reality that's already been created?
It's all the above. That's what I've become more and more convinced of. The more I delve into this, hopefully there will be a third Esoteric Hollywood in the series to complete the trilogy. But I think that it's all the above. I mean, that there's directors who put out films that I think are intentionally sort of dark rituals, you could say. I think that movies by people like Darren Aronofsky, he definitely puts out some very dark occult movies pretty consistently. Sometimes people, I think, are putting out a positive message. I tend to think Kubrick was probably trying to put out somewhat of a positive message, although some people would debate that. But, and it's always hard to determine people's motives, right? So I don't usually try to get too deep into deciphering motives, but it's all the above.
Yeah. All right, I'll tell you what, let's take a little break, and then when we come back, let's just talk about all kinds of stuff. We'll talk about anything you want to talk about. We'll talk about stuff you don't feel comfortable talking about on any other radio program, because this is the mighty Ark Midnight, and our guest is Jay Dyer. And I am John B. Wells. We shall return. Sing it. Tonight's Ark Midnight is what you might call Caravan to Midnight Light. Now, if you want the heavy version, come to caravantomidnight.com and become a member of our Caravan family. For $5 American, you can have access to our entire archive of over 1,100 programs for 2 weeks to sample the subjects we discuss, which are too numerous to mention in this short commercial. But I can tell you those subjects have everything to do with the quality of your life on a multitude of levels. Levels you may not even be aware exist. Plans are being made for you. Plans are being made for your children, and plans are being made for those you love. Find out what those plans are. Go to caravantomidnight.com and click subscribe now. Then select the $5 2-week option. It's not for everyone, but maybe for you. And if it is, you're in for the ride of your life. Go to caravantomidnight.com and find out. The notice read, "All the water in this hotel has been personally passed by the manager." The sign was disturbing enough, but then I tasted the water. At that point, I vowed to never travel out of the country, or in country for that matter, without my personal Travel Berkey System filter. There are many water systems in major cities across the USA that you do not want to drink from. You know the saying, "Don't drink the water"? Well, now you can, and have a 100% chance of surviving the experience. Without all that, get one for yourself and anybody else in your family or crew. You'll know you're looking out for their health, and they will too. Go to ctmstore.com, and while you're there, browse through the other great Berkey filter systems. I've had my Big Berkey system for years, and I love it. The Berkey family of water filter systems, personally passed by me, and it didn't hurt a bit. Go to ctmstore.com. And we're talking about that bunch up there in D.C. with few exceptions. Anyway, hey, Jay, I went over to jaysanalysis.com, and I'm looking at your screen there, and it is written below it, in the next movie analysis stream, we finally cover the Alien franchise and take special note of the thematic influences from Ridley Scott to Cameron to Fincher, Genet's Alien Resurrection, Prometheus, and Alien Covenant. We will cover transhumanism. I put this extra Z's in there in the manner of Paul Harvey in his later years. He used to get into the Z's. He'd do that
I did that. I did that to avoid because that's the same show description on the YouTube video, and I did that to avoid the algorithm because I actually think they do flag those terms.
Oh, they do. They absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea, folks. If you have anything sensitive that you're sending out there, just make it readable, but don't make it normal. Just use sort of a written form of Ebonics, if you will, and you'll have less stuff staring at you. So what about the Alien franchise? How weird is it?
That's an interesting one. I felt like I had not. I touched on Prometheus in the first book, which does talk about the sort of panspermia, alien engineers idea, but I hadn't really gone into depth with the original installment. And I think what we get with Alien 1, what we get is the idea that mankind and his creation are a form of abortion, if you will. I think it's a kind of a bleak picture of man being the result of an accidental abortion, like something out of the pagan Greek tradition or something like this. So I think it's pretty dark, especially if we look at H.R. Giger. His influence is definitely very dark, very Crowleyan. He was very much into the esoteric, the occult, and the dark side of things. And he did, of course, all the concept art for Alien. So we're supposed to think of ourselves like Ripley, like we're just sort of floating in space in this vast nihilistic universe. And throughout the series, it's really, in my view, it's about Ripley's evolution. Right? She goes through this process of change, and eventually, by the fourth installment, she is essentially genetically modified. She's the next stage in human evolution, is where they take the franchise. So that's generally how I read it. I don't think it's all bad. There are aspects to where, there's a critique of corporatism, there's a critique of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, and critique of transhumanism. But at the same time, there's also a kind of affirmation of transhumanism because, from installment number 1 to 4, it's basically a replacement mythology, right? The resurrection that we're talking about here is the Winona Ryder character in the fourth one, who's AI, and essentially Ripley becoming a genetically modified super soldier. That's basically what she is by the fourth installment. Cloning will save us, right? All this kind of stuff. So that's where they took the whole series.
Wow. Now, one of your books is Hollywood Mind Control. You got some signed copies of that, do you? That's what it says here.
Well, my fiance, my fiance I helped her write that one, so we kind of put that one together. And she focused a lot on the pop stars. Because I didn't really do a whole lot with music, and I mainly focused on movies. So she wrote hers, honing in on Beyonce and Katy Perry and Miley Cyrus, and how they're all kind of, Crowleyan, they're influenced by the deep state and all this kind of stuff. So her book deals with more of the music pop star side of things.
If you don't mind, why don't we talk about, since this, notice how the Epstein, it was Epstein, continuous Epstein. Now there's no Epstein at all, because he committed suicide.
Right.
Oh, yeah, in the jail cell with the 9-foot ceilings? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
While he was on suicide watch? Yeah, well, he wasn't on suicide watch. Well, I thought he was. That's why he had paper sheets. No, he wasn't. That's why he was able to hang himself. But the ceilings were still 9 feet tall, right? Yeah. And the cameras went out, right?
The whole world, right, noticed for once that there's a conspiracy that's real. Literally everybody saw this one as the BS that it was. But, I think we people in my circles, we had covered Epstein a long time ago. Maybe 2017, I think, was the first time we talked about Epstein. I did a few videos on Epstein back then. So, and that was pretty obvious because he was already known, and probably before that, for the association with Prince Andrew and all that scandal. So people who had followed the WikiLeaks, they already knew that this kind of stuff was going on. My book cites these kinds of parties, orgy parties. I was talking about Eyes Wide Shut in the first book, these kinds of entrapment situations that go on. So I saw Epstein. I don't get pleasure out of it, but it was definitely a big vindication of everything that I talked about in my first book. Which a lot of people said, "Oh, you're crazy. You're crazy." I was like, "No, Kubrick is telling you that this Eyes Wide Shut stuff is really what goes on." And then lo and behold, Epstein comes out and vindicates all that.
Well, yeah, and the thing about it is, and let me just state it because I don't believe I've ever heard anybody state it. Believe it or not, beautiful women are hunted. They are coerced. They are lassoed. They are bribed. They have trinkets dangled in front of them. I mean, look, there are some people who are not trafficked, okay? I don't care what your proclivities are. You ain't getting trafficked. But the really pretty ones they get trafficked all the time. Beauty is there. I'm not going to say it's their stock and trade, but it just kind of comes with the territory. I mean, an 8-inch strand of blonde hair that was attached to some blue-eyed blonde somewhere can pull a battleship across the ocean under certain circumstances. You know what I'm saying? That's just how it is. So we know this stuff has been going on. And do we think that why would Stanley make such a dangerous movie if he wasn't prepared to die? I don't think he had a heart attack. I think somebody killed him.
It's very likely. I mean, how many times do we see people in the circles of the elite have meet a strange death? Exactly. I mean, this is pretty commonplace when we think about history, when we think about, espionage and sexual entrapment. I mean, prostitution, those are the two oldest professions in the world. And when we think about it from that vantage point, obviously that's gone into statecraft for many, many, many millennia. It's really nothing that out of the ordinary. So actually, I don't mean to be too dark here, but the Epstein-style entrapment situations are probably pretty standard in history. If you've read a lot of history, if you've studied a lot of courtly intrigues, then you know that this is what goes down, unfortunately. And you're absolutely right that recruitment into all kinds of different operations is definitely what happens to talented and beautiful people.
Well, of course, it just really stands to reason. Look, that's why I like talking to you on Caravan. I invite you to come on the Caravan to midnight in the not too distant future, in the next week or two or three or four, whatever. We can have a nice long discussion about this, but we still got another little segment to go, so let's take our break, and we'll come right back to with so little time left for this episode of Ark Midnight. Let's get right back to Jay Dyer. Hey, Jay, I'm thinking I want to cover 2 or 3 things with you pretty quick because this is the last segment, and it's going to go fast. But I'm thinking where there's CIA, there's money, and where there's money, there's lots of it, and big budgets for some of these films. I wonder how they can throw around these unbelievable budgets where these films are concerned, and then it's like shooting craps, Unless those dice are loaded, and I mean really loaded, you're liable to take a real hit there, or somebody's going to take a hit. Do we have any idea that any government money is finding its way, one way or another, whether it's dark money or light money, into the making of some of these films that are predicted to be, by those who study this all the time, to be most influential over the public? How's that?
There was a FOIA request not too long ago, a couple of years ago, that I cited in the beginning of the book, and it turns out that just that we know of, there were Department of Defense, Pentagon, CIA consultation, and propaganda money allocated to thousands of films just in the last few decades. So it's way more than most people know.
Make a smart. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, how can you identify money that's earmarked for propaganda purposes? How can you identify that as being for that purpose?
Well, because it would make no sense for the shows that it was in. For example, there were cases where Top Chef got money through the FOIA request. There's cases where Cupcake Wars got money from the Department of Defense, Hawaii Five-0. And so the way that kind of stuff works is like, oh, well, you'll get a guy who's on there to promote, maybe the next war, right? This would have been under Obama's watch. So maybe, they're talking about, we got to bring cupcakes to, a topple Assad or something, I mean, it sounds absurd, but it would be that kind of a thing, right? Like we need to bring our TV show and, do an episode on how Assad's not allowing cupcakes into Syria or something. I mean, that sounds absurd, but that's the way that a lot of this kind of stuff works. Like they'll slip phrases or characters into shows where they're just solely for propaganda purpose. And I mean, this has been done for a long time. This goes all the way back even to like product placement type stuff. But yeah, so the CIA, NSA, Department of Defense, I mean, all of those agencies have liaison offices. And like I said, the very first thing I cited was the FOIA request that 4,000 pages of documents, 800 major films, and 1,000 TV shows just in the last year, a couple of decades that had this money allocated to it.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And so when we, now I've got a couple of links here. Alien Demon Overlords to Alien Series Fourth Kind, God Told Me To, Jay Dyer. Well, what is that? It's Jay's analysis link. Alien Demon Overlords. Well, what is that?
Well, I tried to do a title that would be catchy on YouTube that the algorithm wouldn't flag, and so it seems like you can get away with talking about aliens and demons. But if you talk about something, like transhumanism, it immediately flags it. So most of those have been monetized. So that's why I titled it that way.
Okay.
But what I talked about there was that at times it seems like there's almost a demonic element to the alien phenomenon. So that's essentially what I'm talking about in that live stream.
Well, amplify that just a little bit.
Well, there's a religious writer who I like, a Christian guy who wrote a famous book called Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, Father Seraphim Rose. And in that book, he proposes that there's multiple layers to the UFO alien phenomenon. On the one level, you have kind of a deep state black operations technology side of it. You have the social engineering side of it, which I documented in the my second book. And then he also talks about how there is a spiritual component, that there is this kind of darker side to the so-called alien phenomenon, which seems to match up with the biblical idea of demons. And he's not the only writer to discuss this. Gary Bates is an evangelical writer who's discussed this. So I think there's an element to that side of the UFO phenomenon, which is true. It seems to point everybody to this New World religion type concept.
Now, I'm wondering about this. There's this worm like limp spaghetti, but a short piece of it. Wiggle worm, kind of a lighted UFO that's been flying around here for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's appeared again. And I really do wonder what this thing is. Now, I will tell you this, and everybody in the audience by now, if they've listened to the show very often, they've already heard this, but this triangular craft made itself visible coming over our house last year, I guess it was. And my wife got a picture of this thing. Not the whole thing, but a little bit of the very tail end of it going over the house. And there are no eaves, so the wall just goes straight up, and then there's the angle of the roof. There's just water just runs straight off it. No gutters, nothing, It's one of those modern jobs. And the thing is she bounced around the corner real quick to get another picture and was gone. And then we just heard last week, I think it was, about a triangular-shaped UFO that was picked up on the ISS camera apparatus. And so these things are coming in and out. Several people have said that they're coming out of the moon. Some people have said that if you see a chemtrail at night, just keep watching and you're going to see something else. And and I'll tell you what, it seems to be true. Either that or it was one heck of a coincidence, which that's fine too. Those things happen all the time. But I'm just wondering, how much of the spiritual do you see in the movies that are coming out today? You can't say, if you post something on YouTube that says, Jesus told me to do this, well, it better be something. It better be something ugly, or it's going to get struck.
I think that a large component of the Hollywood science fiction alien apparatus is tied to both the alien engineering to move us into the idea of the world religion. That's always there. In fact, that's always been there. I did a series of videos on older alien movies, like The Day the Earth Stood Still. That was actually globalist propaganda. If you go back and watch that, the whole point of that movie is that you better have the United Nations, you better de-arm yourself, become pacifists, because if you don't, the aliens are going to destroy you because you're a Luddite and you're stupid and you're backwards and you're xenophobic. That's the whole point of that movie. And then when you fast forward to modern installments of science fiction, like when the Sci-Fi Channel did their version of Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, they had the same type of propaganda there, that if you don't all come together, everybody align themselves under this alien entity that actually looks like a giant demon. If you remember Caravan, the alien, he actually has the appearance of this giant demon. And Arthur C. Clarke was actually running in the circles of the elite. He was in the circles of the Crowleyans and whatnot, and he's literally pretty much telling you in the book, Childhood's End, that it's a demonic type of influence or entity that's telling you to have a global government. It's always been there from the 50s, 40s, and 50s all the way up till now. And so in that sense, I see, a spiritual demonic component. I don't necessarily think that every, sighting or whatever is necessarily something demonic or spiritual. It could be. But typically, I think that the engineering is where we really see the kind of train everybody into accepting that the idea of a global religion. You can look at even the people who do hallucinogens. A lot of them talk about, I did DMT. Joe Rogan told me DMT is awesome. I did DMT and I talked to the Clockwork Elves, and they're just like aliens, and they tell us that we need to have a global government and we need to depopulate everybody so that we can, save the earth and all this stuff. It's always the same spirit. So the same spirit behind Greta and, we need to kill everyone to save everyone. This kind of hysterics. It's the same kind of hysterics behind the people who, voice the alien mythology, which is really picked up. The whole idea that, the aliens are going to save us. This stuff is being regurgitated in mass media now.
Gotcha. Hey, how do we get your books? We're just about out of show here.
Yeah, well, you can go to Jay's Analysis. There's a shop there, and you can sign copies at my site in the shop there, and you can sign up for, my subscription service, or you can just follow me on YouTube or Twitter. So just type in Jay Dyer, and you'll get all that come up pretty easily. And I think, John, I'm scheduled to be with you Tuesday on your show.
That's okay with me. Hey, I just go where they send me, like Kenny Sicario, So the Sicario of the airwaves, that's me.
Well, you know what? I have to say, you mentioned last time I was on to you a couple of years ago, you talked about how much you like the Prisoner series, and I'll let you know that I did a really in-depth analysis of the entire Prisoner, all 17 episodes in Esoteric Hollywood.
And where can we see this? Is that in one of the books?
It's in the second book, yeah.
In the second book, okay. I'm all in. Jay, thanks for coming on. I'll talk to you later, I'll talk to you next week, because this is the end of the week, right?
Yeah, right. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
All right, stay healthy out there. We need you. Jay Dyer, everybody. And that wraps it up for this particular episode.